It's 2:45 in the morning, November 28, 1987. High above the dark Indian Ocean, a Boeing 747 is racing through the night at 35,000 feet. Inside the cargo hold, something is burning so hot it's melting metal that shouldn't melt. Smoke is crawling into the passenger cabin. The captain keys his radio one last time to Mauritius Air Traffic Control. His voice is steady, but you can hear the urgency. "We have smoke in the cabin. Descending now." And then, silence. The controllers try again. "Springbok 295, do you read?" Nothing. The massive jumbo jet carrying 159 souls has just vanished from the radar, and the captain has less than 2 minutes before his aircraft tears itself apart. How does a state-of-the-art Boeing 747 just disappear over open water? What was burning so intensely in the cargo hold that it melted materials designed to withstand extreme heat? Who gave the order to keep flying when the crew knew something was terribly wrong? And why did critical evidence, flight manifests, communication tapes, cargo documents, mysteriously vanish right after the crash? My friend, this is another story about warning signs that were ignored, and secrets that powerful people wanted buried at the bottom of the ocean. I'm Captain Peter Mercer. I've been flying for 25 years, and what you're about to hear is one of the most controversial aviation disasters in history, told from a pilot's point of view. Welcome aboard. Let's set the stage. It's late November 1987. We're talking about South African Airways Flight 295, a regular scheduled cargo passenger service from Taipei, Taiwan to Johannesburg, South Africa, with a refueling stop in Mauritius. The aircraft? A Boeing 747-244B Combi registered as ZS SAS, nicknamed Helderberg. Now let me explain what a Combi means, because this is going to be important later. Most 747s are configured either for passengers or cargo, but a Combi is a hybrid. The forward section carries passengers, and the rear section is set up for cargo pallets and containers. There's a movable bulkhead separating the two sections, and here's the thing. The air conditioning system runs through the entire aircraft, not just the passenger area. Boeing designed it this way for flexibility, but as you'll see in a sec, this innovative design is going to play a deadly role. The Helderberg departed Chiang Kai-shek International Airport in Taipei at 10:30 p.m. local time, 1 hour behind schedule. On board, 140 passengers from various countries and a crew of 19. 6 cargo containers were loaded into the rear hold. During loading, a Taiwanese customs officer did a surprise inspection of the cargo. He spent about 10 minutes checking things out, then signed off, "Yeah, everything looks fine." Now let's talk about the crew. The captain is Dawie Uys, 52 years old, with over 20,000 flight hours and an exceptional service record. The first officer is David Atwell Mikes, a highly experienced pilot in his own right. And the flight engineer is Gert Fourie, a veteran with thousands of hours on the 747. These guys aren't rookies. They're the best South African Airways has. Here's where things get interesting, my friend. Before takeoff, Captain Uys received a confidential document. He signed it, but didn't share its contents with the rest of the crew. Not yet, anyway. Remember that now. Look at the route this flight is taking. Notice something weird? The plane is deliberately avoiding land, hugging the ocean almost the entire way. Why? Because in the 1980s, South Africa was under an oppressive apartheid regime. The world had slapped sanctions on them, and South African Airways was banned from flying over most countries. So their planes had to take long, winding routes, mostly over water, to reach their destinations. But there's more. South Africa was also fighting a border war in Angola and needed weapons and technology. With sanctions in place, where could they get them? Taiwan. Taiwan had been kicked out of the United Nations by China and was also an international pariah. Both countries had friendly relations and were allegedly using cargo flights to transfer sensitive military materials, bypassing global sanctions. Because these flights mostly crossed oceans, where radar coverage was minimal, South African aircraft relied on high-frequency radio to transmit positions and communicate with headquarters through a station called ZOR. This station recorded all communications on magnetic tape. Keep that in mind, because something very suspicious is about to happen with those tapes. Weather conditions that night were typical for the Indian Ocean. Clear skies, calm seas, excellent visibility. Everything seemed perfect for a routine overnight flight, But beneath the surface, something was already going terribly wrong. 10:30 p.m. Departure from Taipei. The Helderberg takes off an hour late. As they climb to cruise altitude, the relief crew takes over for the long 8-hour leg across the Indian Ocean. Captain Uys and his team settle in for some rest. The passengers, business people, families, tourists, are settling into their seats, unaware of what's hidden in the cargo hold below them. 30 a.m. Approaching Mauritius. The main crew returns to the cockpit for the descent into Mauritius. Everything appears normal. The aircraft is performing beautifully. Systems are green across the board. Then Captain Uys decides to share something with his crew. Remember that confidential document from before. He tells First Officer Atwell and Flight Engineer Fourie that his boss informed him there's a Tiananmen bomb on board. Let that sink in for a second. The other two are stunned. Who else knows about this besides you? They ask. Nobody, Uys replies. He goes on to say the documentation was falsified and the cargo belongs to the government. Flight Engineer Fourie mutters almost prophetically, "We're dead." Just then a cabin crew member interrupts, asking what they'd like for dinner. The conversation shifts. They take about 30 minutes to eat. 7:51 a.m. First sign of trouble. First Officer Atwell glances out his window and sees smoke trailing over the right wing. At almost the same moment, there's a loud boom-toos from the rear cargo hold. The cockpit erupts with alarm bells. Systems start failing one by one. 7:52 a.m. Emergency declared. Captain Uys immediately declares an emergency. He calls Mauritius ATC, Mauritius Control, Springbok 295. "We have smoke in the cabin, requesting immediate descent and vectors to Mauritius." ATC responds. "Springbok 295, roger. You are cleared to descend. Mauritius is approximately 230 miles ahead. Emergency services are being alerted." The checklist says to land at the nearest airport, but Mauritius, the only airport, is more than an hour away. The crew knows they're in serious trouble. 7:53 a.m. Rapid descent. Captain Uys initiates an emergency descent, dropping from 35,000 feet to 14,000 feet to reduce cabin pressure and slow the fire's spread. But here's the problem. The Helderberg's cargo hold is classified as Class B. It has smoke detectors, but no automatic fire suppression system. Boeing's design assumes the crew can fight fires manually with portable extinguishers, since they have access to the cargo area. A cabin crew member grabs a fire extinguisher and rushes to the bulkhead door. When he opens it, he's hit with a wall of heat and thick, toxic smoke. The fire is way more intense than anyone imagined. He discharges the extinguisher, but it's like spitting on a forest fire. 7:54 a.m. Situation deteriorates. Boeing designed the cabin to maintain higher air pressure than the cargo hold, so when you open the bulkhead door, cabin air should push into the cargo area, keeping smoke out of the passenger section. But this fire is so intense, it's creating extreme pressure in the hold. The airflow reverses. When the crew opens that door, toxic smoke floods into the passenger cabin. People start choking, breathing in soot and fumes. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, electrical panels are exploding one by one. Each pop signals the loss of another critical system. Hydraulics, avionics, flight controls. The crew is losing the tools they desperately need to keep this plane in the air. 5:05 a.m. Desperate measures. The emergency checklist tells the crew to do something almost unthinkable: open the aircraft doors to let in fresh air. Captain Uys hesitates. This has rarely been done at altitude, but they're out of options. They crack open some doors. Instead of helping, it makes things worse. The rush of oxygen feeds the fire. Flames intensify. Smoke thickens. They try another tactic, recirculating cabin air in hopes of getting fresh air from outside. But the recirculation system just pulls more toxic smoke from the cargo hold and pumps it throughout the cabin. Passengers are suffocating. 7:56 a.m. Systems failing. The heat is now warping the aircraft's structure. Metal is twisting, bending in ways the 747 was never designed to endure. The fire has burned through critical wiring. Flight controls are becoming sluggish. The crew is fighting just to keep the nose up. 7:57 a.m. Final radio call. Captain Uys keys the mic one last time. "Mauritius, Springbok 295, We're losing control. His voice is calm, professional, right to the very end. ATC responds, Springbok 295, Roger. We have emergency services standing by. You are cleared direct, Mauritius. Do you require any further assistance? Silence. Springbok 295. Do you read? Nothing. 7:59 a.m. Catastrophic failure. The intense heat has compromised the fuselage around the cargo hold, right above the bulkhead. When the structural integrity fails, the Helderberg breaks apart in mid-air. The aircraft splits into two pieces. At that instant, everyone on board is doomed. The two halves of the 747 tumble through the sky. The forward section, nose, cockpit, passenger cabin, plunges nose first toward the dark Indian Ocean below. The rear section, tail, cargo hold, the source of the inferno, spirals separately. Passengers who are still conscious experience a moment of weightlessness, then violent acceleration as gravity takes over. The ocean rushes up at them at terminal velocity, over 400 miles per hour. Impact. The forward fuselage slams into the water with the force of a bomb. The structure crumples instantly. Seawater floods in, filling the cabin in seconds. The rear section hits moments later, disintegrating on contact. Debris, metal, luggage, cargo containers scatters across a wide area of ocean. Within 2 minutes of the last radio call, South African Airways Flight 295 and all 159 people on board are gone. The wreckage sinks 4.5 kilometers, nearly 3 miles, to the ocean floor. Deeper than the Titanic. Deeper than almost any recovery operation has ever attempted. At 2:45 a.m., Mauritius ATC realizes something is terribly wrong. They've lost contact with Springbok 295. They try again and again. Half an hour of radio silence. They dispatch search and rescue aircraft, but there's a huge problem. They don't know where to look. The Indian Ocean is pitch black and enormous. The last coordinates Captain Uys gave were approximate. His systems were already failing. Worse, the aircraft is beyond radar range. They're searching blind. 5 days pass. Then, a terrible discovery. Debris and 8 bodies are recovered about 200 kilometers northeast of Mauritius. This confirms the plane went down. But beyond a few pieces of wreckage, the rest is still missing. The bodies that are recovered show severe trauma. When investigators examine their blood, they find smoke and soot in their lungs, clear signs they died from asphyxiation, not the impact with the ocean. Both black boxes have emergency transmitters that send signals for 30 days, then go silent. The clock is ticking. It takes 21 days just to mobilize a rescue ship to the Indian Ocean. When the team finally arrives, they have only 1 week before the transmitters die, 1 week to find answers before they're lost forever. Day 30 comes and goes. Neither the main wreckage nor the black boxes have been found. Investigators knew the pilots had communicated with Zor Station about the emergency. Those tapes could contain crucial information. So they requested the tapes from South African Airways. Guess what? The tapes had disappeared. South African Airways claimed that since more than 30 days had passed, the tapes were recorded over without making a backup. Tapes from the day before were there. Tapes from the day after were there. But the tapes with the Helderberg's information? Conveniently overwritten. Having already spent $1.5 million, pressure mounts on the search team to find answers. In a desperate move, they use sonar scanners to map the ocean floor. They have to find those black boxes. It's their last hope. January 28, 1988, 2 months after the crash. There's a breakthrough. A sonar signal detects possible debris 134 nautical miles from Mauritius. If this is the Helderberg, it's much deeper than any recovery has gone before, 4.5 kilometers down. Even the Titanic is only 3.7 kilometers deep. This will be the deepest and most expensive recovery ever attempted. To confirm it's really the Helderberg, they decide to send down a submarine equipped with cameras. But here's the problem. The sub needs a 7-kilometer fiber optic cable to transmit images. That kind of cable doesn't exist. It has to be custom-made. That'll take months. They also reinforce the submarine with thicker walls to withstand the immense ocean pressure and equip it with better cameras to operate in the pitch-black depths. Finally, they deploy the sub and map the debris field. And bingo, photos start coming in. Scattered across the seafloor is what's left of a Boeing 747. The Helderberg has been found. The wreckage is spread over a large area, a clear sign the aircraft broke apart in mid-air. Among the debris, investigators find 3 wristwatches frozen in time, marking the exact moment of final impact. First, the fire started in the cargo hold. Investigators managed to reconstruct parts of the aircraft from recovered debris. They determined the fire originated in a cargo container located at the front right of the cargo hold. According to the cargo manifest, the container held only electronics and medical equipment. But here's the thing. None of those items could burn at the extreme temperature of 600 degrees, 1,112 degrees Celsius. Among the wreckage, they find a partially melted tennis racket made of graphite. Graphite melts above 600 degrees Celsius. Airplanes are not designed to withstand that temperature, and there should never be anything loaded on an aircraft that can burn that hot. So what was the Helderberg really carrying? Second, the cargo manifest was destroyed. Investigators requested the original cargo manifest, the airway bill. Curiously, that document was lost. It was destroyed immediately after the crash. Instead, they received an official copy, a copy of a document that no longer exists. Given the geopolitical context, can we trust these records? What was really in those containers and pallets? Third, the black box was damaged. Exactly 1 year after the crash, the search team makes a discovery. They've found the cockpit voice recorder. It's buried in the ocean floor, but their joy quickly turns to frustration. After spending so long submerged, most of the recording is damaged. They recover only 80 seconds of audible audio. And frustratingly, the flight data recorder, which could have provided essential clues, is never found. It remains somewhere on the ocean floor to this day. Fourth, the conversation was suspicious. When investigators listen to the cockpit voice recording, they notice a strange conversation. When First Officer Atwell reported seeing smoke, Captain Uys wasn't surprised. He just said, this can't be happening. And when the engineer suggested landing at the nearest airport, Uys responded, "No, I have no choice." That conversation caught their attention. And then there was the reaction of South African Airways chief pilot. When he was woken up in the middle of the night, he wasn't even told which plane had gone down. All he heard was, "We lost an aircraft." But somehow he knew. He just knew it was the Helderberg. Investigators considered another possibility. Maybe this wasn't the first fire that day. Maybe there had been an earlier fire, and South African Airways ordered the captain to keep flying and not land. Given the hostile environment, if the plane had landed and the cargo didn't match the manifest, South Africa would have had an international incident on its hands. That would explain the captain's hesitation and the fact that the chief pilot knew. If the airline had given those instructions, that conversation would have appeared on the tapes, which now conveniently disappeared. Fifth, chemical traces were found. Then another twist. Independent researchers discovered traces of a chemical substance called ammonium perchlorate in the wreckage, a key ingredient in rocket fuel. What was a substance used in rockets doing on the Helderberg, and why wasn't it on the cargo manifest? Can you believe this? Everything pointed to one conclusion. The South African government was smuggling weapons. The destroyed manifest and the missing Zor tapes only increased suspicions. The more investigators dug into the smuggling theory, the more pressure the apartheid government put on them to shut down the investigation and cut costs. This urgency seemed suspicious, like they didn't want the truth to come out. In the end, investigators concluded their report without knowing exactly what caused the fire. The questions remained, and the truth about what really happened on the Helderberg may never be fully known. Here's what the industry learned, my friend. The Helderberg catastrophe wasn't forgotten in silence. It sparked major changes in aviation safety, forcing regulators to confront dangerous gaps, especially in cargo fire protection. Cargo hold fire suppression systems. The tragedy exposed the need for safer Class B compartments. Areas like the Helderberg's cargo hold had smoke detectors, but no automatic fire suppression systems. After the disaster, international standards were strengthened. They now require cargo areas to be equipped with automatic fire extinguishing systems, so fires don't have to be fought with manual extinguishers while the plane is flying. Cargo documentation requirements. The destroyed airway bill that hampered the Helderberg investigation revealed deficiencies in cargo recording and tracking. As a result, stricter rules were implemented, ensuring that mysterious falsified cargo records wouldn't happen again. Airlines are now required to maintain multiple copies of cargo manifests, with backups stored in secure locations. Communication recording standards. The mysteriously overwritten ZOR tapes led to new regulations requiring airlines to preserve all emergency communications for extended periods, with mandatory backups and stricter protocols for handling sensitive recordings. But here's the ethical question I want to leave you with. If a government is using civilian aircraft to smuggle weapons, who's responsible when something goes wrong? The pilots who are just following orders? The airline executives who approved the cargo? Or the government officials who orchestrated the whole operation? What do you think, my friend? Where does the responsibility lie? Look, my friend, aviation is built on lessons learned from tragedy. Every regulation, every safety system, every protocol we follow today exists because someone, somewhere, paid the ultimate price for us to learn that lesson. The 159 people on South African Airways Flight 295 deserved better. They deserved an airline that wouldn't put politics above safety. They deserved a government that wouldn't use them as pawns in an illegal weapons trade. And they deserved investigators who had access to the truth, not destroyed manifests and missing tapes. But out of their tragedy came change. Cargo holds are safer now. Fire suppression systems are mandatory. Documentation can't just disappear. The Helderberg disaster forced the aviation world to confront uncomfortable truths about cargo safety and government accountability. If you found this episode valuable, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. I've got another story about cargo fires you might want to check out. It's right here on screen. This is Captain Peter Mercer. Thanks for being my co-pilot today. I'll see you on the next flight.